They destroyed her in front of the world. They made her invisible. They thought she would disappear forever. But what they didn't know was this. The woman they humiliated wasn't broken. She was reborn. And when she returned, she didn't come back for revenge. She came back to take everything. This is the story of Elena Vaughn, the wife who was erased, the woman who rebuilt herself in silence, and the force of nature who taught an entire city that the most devastating power isn't destruction. It's becoming untouchable. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Grand Meridian Hotel had never looked more beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen constellations from vaulted ceilings, their light fractured into 1,000 dancing diamonds across marble floors polished to mirror perfection. Champagne flutes clinked in rhythm with carefully orchestrated laughter. Women in evening gowns moved like silk through water, their jewelry catching light with every calculated gesture. Men in tailored tuxedos stood in tight clusters, their voices low and confident, discussing deals that would reshape skylines and bank accounts. It was the kind of night where everything glittered, and Elena Vaughn stood at the center of it all, her hand resting lightly on her husband's arm, smiling the smile she had perfected over 7 years of marriage. Warm, but not too warm, present, but not intrusive. The kind of smile that said, "I belong here," without ever demanding to be seen. She wore ivory. Richard had chosen it. He always chose. The gown hugged her frame with expensive precision, the fabric flowing like liquid moonlight, the neckline demure enough to suggest elegance, low enough to remind everyone in the room that Richard Halston had impeccable taste. Her dark hair was swept into a flawless twist, held in place by pins that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her makeup was airbrushed perfection, subtle, sophisticated, invisible. She looked like a trophy, and she had learned over the years to be comfortable in that role. "Smile a little wider, darling," Richard murmured beside her, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "The press is watching." Elena's smile brightened on command. Cameras flashed like silent lightning. Richard Halston was 42, broad-shouldered, with the kind of sharp jawline and silver-threaded temples that made people trust him instinctively. He moved through the world with the ease of a man who had never been told no, who had built an empire from inherited wealth and ruthless ambition, who believed, truly believed, that he deserved every ounce of power he wielded. Real estate, development, investment. The Halston name was stamped across half the city's skyline, and tonight was supposed to be a celebration. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice echoed through the sound system, cutting through the hum of conversation like a blade. "If I could have your attention, please." The room quieted. Elena felt Richard's arm tense beneath her fingers. A spotlight swung across the ballroom, landing on the stage at the far end. A raised platform draped in black velvet, a microphone standing at its center like a guillotine waiting for its neck. Richard leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "This is it." Elena's heart fluttered. "What is?" But he was already moving, his hand slipping from hers as he strode toward the stage with the confidence of a man who owned the room. Because he did. Elena followed, her heels clicking softly against marble, her pulse quickening with something she couldn't quite name. Excitement, maybe. Pride. The same feeling she got whenever Richard succeeded at something monumental, whenever his empire expanded another inch, whenever the world confirmed what she had always believed, that she had chosen well, that she was part of something bigger than herself, that her sacrifices had meant something. Richard climbed the steps to the stage. The spotlight followed him. He adjusted the microphone with practiced ease, his smile broad and blinding, and the crowd leaned in like flowers toward the sun. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice rich and commanding. "This is a very special evening, a milestone, really. 7 years ago, I made a decision that changed the trajectory of my life." Elena's breath caught. He was going to talk about their marriage. She felt warmth bloom in her chest, a rare and fragile thing. Richard wasn't sentimental. He didn't do public declarations. He didn't— "7 years ago," Richard continued, his eyes scanning the crowd, "I made a commitment, a partnership, and tonight I want to acknowledge that it's time to move forward." The warmth in Elena's chest flickered. Something was wrong. "I've built an empire," Richard said, his tone shifting, becoming firmer, more businesslike. I've created something extraordinary, and I've done it by making hard choices. By refusing to be held back by sentiment or obligation. Elena's fingers tightened around her clutch. So tonight, Richard said, his smile never wavering, I want to announce something important. The room was silent. Elena felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath her feet. I'm getting a divorce. The words landed like a bomb. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swiveled. Elena's vision blurred at the edges. My marriage to Elena Vaughn, Richard continued, his voice steady, clinical, has run its course. We've grown apart. It's amicable, of course. But I believe in honesty, in transparency, and I wanted you all to hear it from me first. Elena couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the words spilling from her husband's mouth like they were rehearsed, polished, prepared. And I want to introduce you, Richard said, turning toward the side of the stage, to the woman who has been my partner in every sense of the word, the woman who understands my vision, my ambition, my future. A figure stepped into the light, tall, blonde, elegant in a way that was sharp and calculated, her red dress clinging to her like a second skin. Vanessa Crane, Richard's secretary. No, not his secretary, his partner. Vanessa moved to Richard's side with the ease of someone who had stood there 1,000 times before. She slipped her hand into his, and he squeezed it, his smile warm, genuine, the kind of smile he used to give Elena in private moments that felt like a lifetime ago. The crowd erupted, not in shock, in applause. They were clapping. Elena stood frozen at the base of the stage, her ivory gown suddenly too tight, too bright, too much. Her ears rang. Her hands shook. The chandeliers above her swayed like they were mocking her, their light too harsh, too revealing. Richard was still talking, his voice distant and muffled, something about new beginnings and fresh starts and the importance of following your truth. But Elena wasn't listening anymore. She was drowning, in front of everyone. Elena? A voice cut through the fog. She turned, her movements mechanical, and found herself face to face with a reporter, young, eager, microphone extended like a weapon. How do you feel about the announcement? The reporter asked, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed excitement. Elena opened her mouth. No sound came out. More cameras swiveled toward her. More faces turned. More eyes. Watching. Waiting. Hungry. Elena Halston, another voice called. Any comment on the divorce? Were you aware of the relationship? How long has this been going on? Is it true you signed a prenup? The questions came like shrapnel, each one tearing through her composure, her dignity, her carefully constructed life. She took a step back, then another. Her heel caught on the hem of her gown. She stumbled. No one reached out to steady her. They just watched. And Richard was still on stage, his arm around Vanessa, his smile bright and effortless, basking in the applause like it was sunlight. He didn't even look at her. Elena turned and ran. The rain started the moment she stepped outside. Of course it did. Because the universe had a sense of humor. Elena stood on the steps of the Grand Meridian, her ivory gown soaked through, mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivers, her hands shaking so hard she couldn't hold her clutch. The valet stared at her like she was a ghost. Mrs. Halston, he ventured carefully. Do you need a car? Elena said, her voice hoarse. Please. Of course. Where to? Where to? She didn't know. She had lived in Richard's mansion for 7 years. Before that, she had lived in a modest apartment paid for by Richard. Before that, she had been a design student surviving on scholarships and dreams. She had no family, no close friends. Richard had always said he preferred privacy, and over time, Elena's world had shrunk to fit his preferences. Dinners with his colleagues, galas with his clients, charity events that served his image. She had disappeared into his life, and now she was being erased from it. The mansion, she whispered. Take me home. The valet nodded and flagged down a black sedan. Elena climbed inside, her wet dress sticking to the leather seats, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The city blurred past the windows, lights and shadows, noise and silence, a world that kept moving even as hers shattered. By the time the car pulled up to the mansion gates, the rain had turned into a downpour. Elena stepped out, her heels sinking into gravel, and froze. The gates were closed, locked. She approached slowly, her hands gripping the wrought iron, rain pouring down her face. "Hello?" she called, her voice swallowed by the storm. "Hello!" The intercom crackled to life. "Mrs. Halston." It was Gerald, the head of security. His voice was stiff, formal. "I have instructions not to let you inside." Elena's knees nearly gave out. "What?" Mr. Halston called ahead. "He said you're no longer authorized to enter the property." "Gerald," Elena said, her voice breaking. "I live here." "Not anymore, ma'am." "Please," she whispered. "Please. I just need to get my things." "Your belongings have been packed. They're at the gate." Elena looked down. There, sitting in the rain beside the stone pillar, was a single suitcase. Black. Expensive. Hers. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of smiling beside him, supporting him, shaping her entire existence around his needs, his ambitions, his world. And this was what she got. A suitcase in the rain. Elena picked it up with trembling hands, the weight of it almost too much to bear, and turned back toward the street. The sedan was gone. She was alone. Completely, utterly alone. She started walking. She didn't know where she was going, didn't care. She just needed to move, to put distance between herself and the gates that had locked her out of her own life. The rain soaked through her gown, through her skin, through her bones. She walked until her feet bled inside her designer heels. Walked until the lights of the city became distant and cold. Walked until she found herself standing outside a cheap motel on the edge of town, its neon sign flickering weakly in the storm. Vacancy. Elena pushed through the door. The clerk behind the counter looked up, his eyes widening at the sight of her, drenched, shaking, makeup streaked, a suitcase clutched in white-knuckled hands. "I need a room," Elena said quietly. The clerk nodded, sliding a key across the counter without a word. Elena paid in cash, the only thing she had left in her clutch, and climbed the stairs to room 12. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, closed it behind her, and collapsed. For 3 days, Elena didn't move. She lay in that motel room, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her body numb, her mind replaying the night over and over like a broken record. "I'm getting a divorce. This is Vanessa. You're no longer authorized. A suitcase in the rain." She didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't cry. She just existed in the hollow space where her life used to be. On the 4th day, her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But something, some flicker of muscle memory, some ingrained reflex, made her reach for it. "Hello? Elena Vaughn?" The voice was brisk, professional. "This is Martin Cross from Cross & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of Richard Halston regarding the dissolution of your marriage." Elena sat up slowly. "I'm listening." "Mr. Halston has filed for divorce. The papers will be served to you within the week. I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that, per the prenuptial agreement you signed 7 years ago, you are not entitled to any assets, properties, or financial support." Elena's fingers tightened around the phone. "I see." "Mr. Halston has, however, agreed to cover your legal fees up to $5,000 should you choose to retain counsel." "How generous." The lawyer paused. "Mrs. Vaughn—" "It's Halston," Elena said quietly. "For now." "Mrs. Halston," the lawyer corrected smoothly. "I understand this is difficult, but the prenuptial agreement is ironclad. There's no room for negotiation." "I'm not interested in negotiating." Another pause. "I'm sorry?" "I said I'm not interested in negotiating," Elena repeated, her voice steady now, cold. "Tell Richard I'll sign the papers. Tell him he can have everything." "Mrs. Halston, I would advise you to at least consult with—" "I don't need advice," Elena said. "I need him to leave me alone." She hung up. The phone clattered onto the bed. Elena stood, her legs shaky, and walked to the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable. Hollow eyes, pale skin, hair tangled and lifeless. A ghost. She leaned closer, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. And then, for the first time since the gala, she spoke. "You're not dead," she whispered to her reflection. You're not broken. You're not done. Her voice cracked. You're just invisible. She stared at herself for a long moment. Then she turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on her face, and made a decision. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to plead. She wasn't going to give Richard Halston the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. She was going to disappear completely. And when she came back, if she came back, it would be on her terms, not his. The next morning, Elena opened her suitcase. Inside were clothes she barely recognized, designer labels, silk and cashmere, things Richard had bought for her because they fit the image he wanted to project. She pulled them out one by one and dropped them on the floor. At the bottom of the suitcase, buried beneath the finery, she found something she had forgotten she still owned: a sketchbook. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it, the cover worn and soft from years of use. She hadn't drawn in 7 years. Richard had called it a hobby, a distraction, something she could pursue later when his empire was more stable, when they had more time. Later never came. Elena opened the sketchbook. The pages were filled with designs, clothing, accessories, patterns she had created back when she was a student, back when she still believed she could build something of her own. She traced her fingers over the lines, the curves, the details she had poured her heart into. And for the first time in days, she felt something other than pain. She felt anger, not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, focused kind, the kind that builds empires. Elena closed the sketchbook and stood. She walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawled below. The same city where Richard Halston ruled, where his name was etched into glass and steel, where everyone knew his power. But they didn't know hers, not yet. She turned away from the window, pulled out a piece of paper, and wrote 3 words. Elena Vaughn is dead. Then she wrote 3 more. Aria Vale is born. She didn't know how yet. Didn't know where, or when, or with what. But she knew this. She would rebuild. She would rise. And when she returned, Richard Halston would learn what it meant to erase the wrong woman. 2 weeks later, Elena Vaughn boarded a bus heading north. She carried 1 bag, not the suitcase Richard had left her, but a simple canvas duffel she bought at a thrift store. Inside were her sketchbook, a change of clothes, and exactly $300. Everything else she left behind. The name, the life, the version of herself that had been shaped and molded and erased. She sat by the window watching the city disappear behind her, the skyline shrinking until it was nothing but a smudge on the horizon. And as the bus carried her toward a future she couldn't yet see, Elena closed her eyes and made herself a promise. She would not return as a victim. She would not return broken. She would return as something Richard Halston never saw coming. A force of nature he couldn't control, a woman he couldn't erase. And when that day came, the world would remember her name. Not because he gave it to her, but because she built it herself. The coastal town of Crescent Bay wasn't on any tourist map. It was the kind of place people passed through on their way to somewhere more important, a collection of weathered buildings clinging to rocky cliffs, fishing boats bobbing in a harbor that smelled of salt and diesel, streets narrow enough that 2 cars couldn't pass without one pulling over. The bus dropped Elena at the edge of town just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and fading gold. She stood on the cracked pavement, her canvas bag slung over one shoulder, and breathed in air that tasted nothing like the city she had left behind. No exhaust fumes, no polish, no pretense, just wind and water and the distant cry of gulls. For the first time in weeks, Elena felt like she could breathe. A small inn sat at the corner of Main Street, its sign hand-painted and peeling, the words barely legible in the dying light. Harborview Lodge, rooms by the week. Elena pushed through the door. The lobby was small, cluttered with nautical decorations that looked like they had been salvaged from yard sales. A woman in her 60s stood behind the desk, silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, reading glasses perched on her nose as she worked through a crossword puzzle. She looked up when Elena entered, her gaze sharp and assessing. "Help you?" "I need a room," Elena said quietly. "Long term, if possible." The woman set down her pen. "How long?" "I don't know yet." A pause. The woman's eyes traveled over Elena's face, lingering on the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped the strap of her bag like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Running from something or toward something? The woman asked. Elena blinked. Excuse me? People who come to Crescent Bay fall into two categories, the woman said matter-of-factly. Runners and seekers. Which one are you? Elena considered the question. Both, she said finally. The woman smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips. Fair enough. I'm Margaret. I own this place. Rent's $400 a month, utilities included. Breakfast comes with the room if you're up early enough. House rules are on the wall. Break them and you're out. Elena nodded. I'll take it. Margaret slid a key across the counter. Room 7, up the stairs, end of the hall. Overlooks the water if you keep the curtains open. Elena took the key, the metal cold against her palm. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Margaret said, returning to her crossword. This town's small. Everyone knows everyone. You want privacy, you'll have to earn it. Elena climbed the stairs, her footsteps creaking on old wood, and found room 7 exactly where Margaret said it would be. The room was tiny. A bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, a window that rattled when the wind blew. But it was hers. Elena set her bag on the bed, walked to the window, and looked out at the harbor stretching dark and vast beneath the stars. She had $300 to her name. No connections, no plan, no safety net. Just a sketchbook and a promise she had made to herself. She pulled out the sketchbook now, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened to a blank page. Her hand moved almost on its own, pencil scratching across paper, lines forming shapes, shapes forming designs. She didn't know what she was creating. She just knew she needed to create something, anything, to prove to herself that she still existed. Hours passed. The moon rose. The harbor fell silent, and Elena drew until her hand cramped and her eyes burned and the page in front of her was filled with something that looked almost like hope. She fell asleep with the sketchbook open on her lap, the pencil still clutched in her fingers. And for the first time since the gala, she didn't dream of Richard Halston. Morning came cold and gray, the smell of coffee drifting up through the floorboards. Elena woke stiff and disoriented, her neck aching from the angle she had slept in, the sketchbook fallen to the floor beside the bed. She picked it up, looked at what she had drawn the night before, and felt something tighten in her chest. It was a dress, simple, elegant, made from flowing fabric that moved like water, the neckline asymmetrical, the hemline uneven in a way that suggested intentional artistry rather than careless design. It was beautiful, and it was hers. No one had told her what to create. No one had shaped it to fit an image or a brand or an expectation. It was purely, undeniably her own. Elena closed the sketchbook carefully and stood. She needed work, needed money, needed to survive long enough to figure out what came next. She dressed in jeans and a plain sweater from her bag, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and went downstairs. Margaret was in the small dining room, setting out plates of scrambled eggs and toast for the handful of guests scattered at mismatched tables. "Morning," Margaret said without looking up. "Coffee's on the counter. Help yourself." Elena poured a cup, the warmth seeping into her hands, and sat at a table by the window. Margaret appeared a moment later with a plate of eggs and bacon. "You eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." "I'm fine," Elena started to say. Margaret set the plate down with a firm clink. "Wasn't a question." Elena looked at the food, her stomach twisting with something between hunger and nausea, and forced herself to take a bite. It was good, simple and warm and real. She ate slowly, methodically, until the plate was clean and the coffee was gone, and Margaret was refilling her cup without asking. "Thank you," Elena said quietly. Margaret sat across from her, her own mug cradled in weathered hands. "You said you needed long-term. That means you're planning to stay, which means you'll need work." Elena nodded. "I will. Do you know, there's a workshop 2 streets over," Margaret interrupted. "Artisan Collective. Woodworkers, potters, couple of textile artists. They take on apprentices sometimes if you're willing to learn and don't complain about splinters." Elena sat up straighter. "Textile artist? Chemise. Woman named Claire runs the weaving side. Tough as nails, but fair. Tell her Margaret sent you. She'll at least hear you out." Elena's heart beat faster. I will, thank you. Stop thanking me, Margaret said, standing. Just don't make me regret renting to you. Elena finished her coffee, rinsed her dishes in the small kitchen sink, and stepped out into the gray morning. Crescent Bay looked different in daylight, worn but sturdy, the kind of place that had weathered storms and kept standing, that didn't care about appearances because survival mattered more than shine. Elena followed Margaret's directions, walking 2 streets over until she found a low building with a hand-carved sign hanging above the door. Crescent Collective. She hesitated only a moment before pushing inside. The workshop was a chaos of creation. Sawdust hung in the air like snow. A pottery wheel spun in one corner, wet clay shaping beneath steady hands. A loom clacked rhythmically in another, threads weaving into intricate patterns. Tools hung from walls, projects in various stages of completion crowded every surface. And in the center of it all stood a woman in her 50s, her hair streaked with gray, her hands stained with dye, her expression fierce and focused as she examined a length of woven fabric. Can I help you? She called without looking up. Elena stepped forward. Margaret from the Harborview sent me. She said you might need an apprentice. The woman finally looked up, her eyes sharp and assessing. Margaret's got a habit of sending me strays. You know anything about textiles? I studied design, Elena said. Fashion, I can sketch, pattern, sew. Can you weave? No. Can you dye? No. Can you follow instructions without whining? Elena met her gaze. Yes. The woman studied her for a long moment, then set down the fabric. I'm Claire. You work here, you work hard, no shortcuts, no excuses. You mess up, you fix it. You break something expensive, you pay for it. Clear? Clear. You start tomorrow, 6 in the morning. Don't be late. Elena blinked. That's it? Claire picked up the fabric again. You want a formal interview? Background check? References? No, I just... Then stop wasting my time and show up tomorrow ready to work. Elena felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope. Thank you, she said. Claire waved a hand dismissively. Save the gratitude. Let's see if you last a week first. Elena left the workshop with her heart pounding, her hands shaking, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't let herself consider in weeks. She had work. She had a place to stay. She had a chance. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Wunk. The first week nearly broke her. Claire wasn't exaggerating about the work. Elena arrived every morning at 6, her hands still soft from years of lotions and manicures, and spent 12 hours learning to operate looms, mix dyes, understand the properties of different fibers. Her fingers blistered, her back ached, her shoulders burned, but she didn't complain. She learned how wool held color differently than cotton, how tension affected the pattern, how patience was the difference between beauty and mediocrity. Claire watched her with the intensity of a hawk, correcting her mistakes with blunt efficiency, never offering praise but occasionally nodding in a way that felt like acknowledgement. The other artists in the collective kept their distance at first, suspicious of the newcomer who showed up out of nowhere with no backstory and no connections. But Elena didn't push, didn't try to ingratiate herself, just worked. And slowly, over weeks that blurred into months, she earned something more valuable than friendship. Respect. A potter named James started leaving coffee by her station in the mornings. A woodworker named Samuel showed her how to fix a broken loom without having to replace expensive parts. And Claire, stern and unyielding Claire, began teaching her the techniques she reserved for artists she believed had potential. You've got an eye, Claire said one evening, examining a piece Elena had woven, a pattern she had designed herself based on sketches from her old notebook. Not trained, not refined, but honest. That matters more than people think. Elena looked up from where she was cleaning her station. What do you mean? Claire held the fabric up to the light. Most people weave what they think they're supposed to weave. Pretty patterns, safe choices, but you... She gestured at the piece. You're weaving what you feel. That's rare. Elena felt her throat tighten. I don't know if that's a good thing. It's the only thing, Claire said simply. Everything else is just noise. That night, Elena sat in her small room at the inn, her hands raw and aching, and opened her sketchbook. She had been filling it slowly over the months, designs pouring out of her whenever she had a spare moment, ideas she didn't know what to do with but couldn't stop creating. Dresses, coats, scarves, accessories, each one unique, each one hers. She traced her fingers over the lines, the shapes, the vision taking form on the page. And for the first time, she let herself imagine something impossible. What if she could turn these sketches into something real, not for Richard, not for anyone else, just for herself? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. She pulled out a fresh page and began to draw. 6 months after arriving in Crescent Bay, Elena had saved enough money to buy fabric. Not much, just enough for one project. She stood in the small shop at the edge of town, running her fingers over bolts of linen and silk and wool, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The shopkeeper, an elderly man named Mr. Donovan, watched her with patient curiosity. "You making something special?" he asked. Elena nodded slowly. "I think so." "A first time buying for yourself?" She looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" Mr. Donovan smiled. "You've got the look. Scared and excited all at once. That's how you know it matters." Elena chose linen. Soft and natural, the color of sand and sea glass, fabric that felt like Crescent Bay itself. She carried it back to the inn carefully, like it was made of glass. That night she laid it out on her bed and began to cut. Her hands remembered what her mind had forgotten, the muscle memory of pattern making, of precision, of creation. She worked through the night, stitching by lamplight, her fingers moving with growing confidence. When the sun rose, she held up what she had made, a dress. Simple, flowing, elegant, exactly like the sketch from her first night in Crescent Bay. Elena put it on, standing in front of the cracked mirror in her room, and for the first time in months, she recognized the woman looking back at her. Not Elena Halston, the trophy wife. Not Elena Vaughn, the discarded woman. Someone new, someone stronger. She wore the dress to work that morning. Claire looked up when she entered, her eyes narrowing, then widening. "You make that." Elena nodded. Claire circled her slowly, examining the construction, the seams, the way the fabric moved. "Where'd you learn to sew like this?" "Design school," Elena said quietly. "A lifetime ago." Claire met her eyes. "You've been hiding your light under a bushel, girl." Elena frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean you're wasting your talent on looms when you should be creating your own work." Claire gestured at the dress. "This is art, real art, the kind people pay for." Elena shook her head. "I don't have the resources to Then find them," Claire interrupted. "You think I started with a fully stocked workshop? I started with one loom in a garage and a dream too stubborn to die. You've got more than I had. You've got skill." Elena felt something shift inside her chest, a door opening, a possibility she had been too afraid to name. "I wouldn't know where to start," she admitted. Claire smiled, a rare and genuine thing. "Lucky for you, you know someone who does." Claire introduced her to the local craft market, a monthly gathering where artisans from across the coast set up stalls to sell their work, where tourists and locals mingled, where handmade goods commanded prices that made Elena's head spin. "You make 3 more pieces," Claire said as they walked through the market, examining booths. "Bring them next month, see what happens." Elena looked around at the crowds, the transactions, the artists confidently presenting their work. "What if no one buys anything?" "Then you learn what doesn't work and try again," Claire said simply. "But you won't know until you try." Elena went home that night and started sketching. 3 pieces. She could do 3 pieces. She worked every spare moment, staying up late after shifts at the collective, her fingers flying across fabric, her mind focused with laser precision. A scarf, a jacket, a dress, each one unique, each one carrying a piece of the ocean and the cliffs and the storms that had rebuilt her. She used fabrics she bought from Mr. Donovan, techniques she learned from Claire, designs that came from somewhere deep and honest inside her. When the market day came, Elena set up her small booth with shaking hands. Her 3 pieces hung on a simple rack. Her sketchbook sat open nearby, showing other designs. And she waited. For hours, people walked past. Some glanced, Some touched the fabric. Most kept moving. Elena felt her hope crumbling with each passing minute. She had been foolish to think. "Excuse me." Elena looked up. A woman in her 40s stood in front of the booth, her hand on the scarf, her eyes bright with interest. "Did you make this?" the woman asked. Elena nodded. "I did." "It's beautiful. The color, the weight." The woman wrapped it around her shoulders. "How much?" Elena's mind went blank. She hadn't even thought about pricing. 75, she said, the number falling out of her mouth, half guess, half prayer. The woman didn't hesitate. "I'll take it." Elena wrapped it carefully, her hands trembling, and watched the woman walk away wearing something she had created. She had made her first sale. Before the day ended, she sold all 3 pieces and took orders for 5 more. Elena walked home that evening with $200 in her pocket and tears streaming down her face. Not because of the money, because for the first time since the night of the gala, she felt like she existed. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's mistake, as herself. The months that followed were a blur of creation and growth. Elena rented a small studio space above a bakery, the smell of bread rising through the floorboards every morning, the light streaming through salt-stained windows perfect for working. She bought a sewing machine, more fabric, better tools. She created piece after piece, each one selling faster than the last, her designs gaining a quiet reputation among the tourists and collectors who frequented the coast. People started asking for custom work, started remembering her name. Not Elena Halston, Aria Vale. The name she had chosen for herself. A name that meant nothing to anyone, that carried no history or shame or expectation, just potential. Claire became her mentor in earnest, teaching her not just technique but business, how to price her work, how to talk to buyers, how to protect her art without underselling her worth. "You're too generous," Claire said one afternoon, examining a contract Elena was considering. "They're offering you half what this is worth." "It's still more than I've ever made," Elena argued. "That's not the point. The point is knowing your value and demanding others recognize it too." Elena thought about that for a long time, knowing her value. She had spent 7 years letting someone else determine what she was worth. Never again. She rewrote the contract, doubled her price, sent it back. They accepted without question. Elena stared at the confirmation email for a full minute before letting out a laugh that sounded almost hysterical. She was doing it, actually doing it, building something real. 2 years after arriving in Crescent Bay, Elena's work caught the attention of a boutique owner from Portland. The woman showed up at the craft market unannounced, elegant and sharp-eyed, moving through the stalls with the precision of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. She stopped at Elena's booth, picked up a jacket, examined the stitching, tried it on. "Who made this?" "I did," Elena said. The woman's eyes narrowed. "All of it? Design, construction, everything?" "Yes." "Do you have more inventory?" Elena gestured at the pieces on display. "This is everything I brought today, but I have more at my studio." The woman pulled out a business card. "I own 3 boutiques in Portland, high-end, sustainable fashion. Your work fits my aesthetic perfectly. I want to carry your line." Elena's heart stopped. "My line?" "If you're interested, I'll need at least 20 pieces to start. Can you do that?" Elena's mind raced. 20 pieces. That would take months. Would require more fabric, more time, more... "Yes," she heard herself say. "I can do that." The woman smiled. "Good. I'll be in touch." Elena stood frozen long after the woman left, the business card clutched in her hand, her entire body vibrating with something she couldn't name. This was it. The moment everything changed. She ran back to her studio, her mind already spinning with designs, with possibilities, with the terrifying and exhilarating realization that she was about to take the leap from artisan to designer. She worked for 3 months straight. 20 pieces became 25, each one better than the last, each one carrying the signature style that was becoming recognizable, that people were starting to seek out. Sustainable fabrics, elegant lines, designs that moved like water and felt like air. When she delivered them to Portland, the boutique owner's eyes lit up. "These are extraordinary," she said, running her fingers over a coat. "I knew you had talent, but this..." She shook her head. This is art. The pieces sold out in 3 weeks. The boutique owner called, breathless. I need more, double the order, and I want exclusivity on the coast. Elena negotiated, held firm, demanded terms that protected her work and her vision, and the boutique owner agreed to all of it. Within 6 months, Elena's designs were in boutiques across the Pacific Northwest. Within a year, she had hired 2 assistants and moved to a larger studio. Within 18 months, she was fielding calls from buyers in Los Angeles and New York. Aria Vale was becoming a name people recognized, and Elena Vaughn was becoming someone Richard Halston would never recognize. Someone powerful, someone untouchable, someone who had built an empire from nothing but talent and determination and the refusal to stay erased. 3 years after the night of the gala, Elena sat in her studio overlooking the ocean, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, and allowed herself to look back. At the woman who had collapsed in a motel room. At the woman who had arrived in Crescent Bay with $300 and a broken heart. At the woman who had rebuilt herself thread by thread, stitch by stitch, until she became someone new. Her phone buzzed, an email from her accountant. The subject line read, Q3 Revenue Report. Elena opened it, scanned the numbers, and felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Her company had just crossed $10 million in annual revenue. She was a millionaire, self-made, independent, successful, everything Richard had said she could never be without him. Elena set down her phone and walked to the window. The ocean stretched dark and infinite, the same water that had witnessed her rebirth. She thought about Richard for the first time in months, wondered if he ever thought about her, wondered if he knew what he had lost, wondered if he regretted it. Probably not. Men like Richard didn't regret. They moved forward, always convinced they had made the right choice, always certain the world would bend to their will. But Elena was done wondering, done caring. She had built something he could never touch, could never claim, could never diminish, and soon, very soon, she would return to the city that had watched her humiliation, not as a victim, as a victor. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under her studio door in a cream envelope with embossed lettering. Elena found it when she came in early, coffee in hand, sunlight streaming through the windows turning the ocean beyond into liquid gold. She picked up the envelope, turned it over, and felt her breath catch. The return address was from the city. Her city. The one she had fled 3 years ago in the rain. Elena set down her coffee with careful precision and opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, heavy stock, elegant typography. You are cordially invited to the Metropolitan Real Estate Summit, a celebration of innovation, sustainability, and the future of urban development. Grand Meridian Hotel, Saturday, November 18th, the Grand Meridian. The same hotel where Richard had announced their divorce, where he had paraded Vanessa in front of cameras and crowds, where Elena's life had shattered into pieces too small to count. Her hands didn't shake as she read the invitation. They should have. But 3 years of rebuilding had taught her something Richard never understood. Pain could be transmuted into power, and she had become an alchemist. Elena walked to her desk, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number she had saved months ago but never used. A crisp voice answered on the second ring. Whitmore Consulting, this is David. David, this is Aria Vale. We spoke about investment opportunities last quarter. A pause, then warmth flooded his tone. Ms. Vale, of course. I've been following your company's growth. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. I'm ready to expand, Elena said, her voice steady. And I need strategic advice on acquiring real estate, urban properties specifically. Are you available for a consultation? For you? Absolutely. When were you thinking? Elena looked at the invitation again. November 18th, 6 weeks away. As soon as possible, she said. I want to move quickly. I can clear my schedule for Friday. Shall we say 10 o'clock? Perfect. Elena hung up and stood at the window, watching waves crash against rocks that had withstood centuries of storms. She had spent 3 years building her empire in silence. Now it was time to make noise. Started. David Whitmore met her in a sleek downtown office that smelled of leather and ambition. He was younger than she expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes behind designer glasses and the kind of handshake that said he knew exactly what he was worth. Ms. Vale, he greeted, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. I've done my homework since your call. Your company's trajectory is remarkable. Sustainable fashion with profit margins most established brands would kill for. What makes you want to pivot into real estate? Elena sat, crossing her legs, her posture perfect. From years of practice at Gallus, she used to attend on Richard's arm. Funny how some skills transferred. I'm not pivoting, she said. I'm expanding. My brand is built on sustainability and ethical practices. I want to invest in properties that reflect those values. Urban renewal projects, buildings that can be transformed into mixed-use spaces combining retail, residential, and community resources. David leaned back, his expression intrigued. That's ambitious. Also expensive. Do you have capital ready? 10 million, Elena said simply. More if the right opportunity presents itself. His eyebrows rose. You have access to 10 million liquid? I have 10 million liquid, she corrected. My company's revenue last quarter exceeded projections by 40%. I've been conservative with expansion costs. The money is there. David whistled low. Most designers I work with are drowning in debt trying to keep up with production costs. You're sitting on a fortune. I learned early that independence requires discipline, Elena said, her voice cooling slightly. I don't believe in leveraging myself into vulnerability. Something flickered in David's eyes. Recognition, maybe. Respect. Smart, he said. So what exactly are you looking for? Elena pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the desk. Inside were printouts, research, property listings she had been tracking for months. These buildings, she said, tapping the folder. They're all in foreclosure or distressed sales. Historic properties that have been neglected, stripped for parts, left to rot. I want to buy them, restore them, turn them into something that serves the community instead of just extracting wealth from it. David flipped through the listings, his expression growing more serious with each page. These are all in the city, he said slowly. Yes. Some of these properties are tied up in lawsuits, complex ownership structures, years of legal battles. I'm aware. And this one, he pulled out a specific listing, his eyes narrowing. This is the Halston estate, the mansion that belonged to Richard Halston, Elena finished. Yes, I know. David looked up sharply. You know Richard Halston? Elena met his gaze without flinching. I used to, a long time ago. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unasked questions. David was smart enough not to ask them. The Halston estate goes to auction in 5 weeks, he said instead. It's the crown jewel of foreclosure sales this year. Every developer in the city will be bidding. Then I'll need to bid higher, Elena said. Ms. Vale, with all due respect, this isn't just about money. Halston still has powerful connections. People who might not appreciate an outsider swooping in. I'm not an outsider, Elena interrupted quietly. And I'm not swooping, I'm reclaiming. David studied her for a long moment. Then he closed the folder and smiled. All right, he said. Let's make you a real estate mogul. The next 4 weeks were a masterclass in strategy. Elena flew back and forth between Crescent Bay and the city, maintaining her design work while simultaneously building a war chest for the auction. David introduced her to lawyers, accountants, real estate experts who could navigate the labyrinth of foreclosure sales and property law. She learned the language of leverage, of silent partnerships, of shell companies and strategic anonymity. She set up an investment LLC under a name that meant nothing to anyone. Coastal Holdings Group. Bland. Forgettable. Perfect. And she began placing preliminary bids on smaller properties, testing the waters, establishing credibility in the real estate market. Each property she acquired, she transformed. An abandoned warehouse became a community arts center. A foreclosed apartment building became affordable housing with rooftop gardens. A gutted retail space became a co-op for local artisans. The pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. Aria Vale didn't just buy properties, she healed them. The press started noticing. Small articles at first, local interest pieces about a fashion designer with a conscience, a woman who believed buildings could be more than investments. Then larger outlets picked up the story. Business magazines profiled her company. Sustainability advocates celebrated her approach, and the name Aria Vale began appearing in circles that would have once seemed impossible. The same circles where Richard Halston's name used to dominate. Elena watched it all from her studio in Crescent Bay, her team handling day-to-day operations while she focused on the endgame. Claire visited one evening, letting herself in without knocking, finding Elena surrounded by property documents and design sketches. "You're playing a dangerous game," Claire said without preamble. Elena looked up. "Am I?" "Going back to that city, buying up properties, making noise." Claire sat down across from her. "You're not just building something, you're making a statement." "Maybe I am." "Is it worth it?" Elena set down her pen. 3 years ago, I was thrown out of my own home with a suitcase in the rain. My husband announced our divorce at a party like it was a merger. I had nothing. No money, no support, no identity outside of being his wife. "And now you're a millionaire with your own empire," Claire said. "You've already won. Why go back?" "Because winning isn't enough," Elena said quietly. "I need to finish what he started. I need to stand in the same room where he erased me and show him exactly what he threw away." Claire was silent for a moment. Then she smiled. "Okay, just don't lose yourself in the process." "I won't," Elena promised. "I know exactly who I am now. That's the difference." The week before the auction, Elena returned to the city. Not in secret this time. She checked into a 5-star hotel under her own name, Aria Vale, and watched the recognition flicker across the concierge's face. "Ms. Vale, we're honored to have you. Your suite is ready." Her suite overlooked the city skyline, a view she used to see from Richard's penthouse office. She stood at the window now, watching lights flicker on as dusk settled, and felt nothing. No nostalgia, no longing, no pain, just cold calculation. Her phone rang. David Whitmore. "I've confirmed your registration for the auction," he said. "You're bidder number 47. I've also arranged for discrete transfer protocols so the winning bid won't immediately trace back to you." "Good," Elena said. "What's the expected competition?" 15 serious bidders. Half are developers looking to flip the property. The other half are preservationists who want to turn it into a museum or event space. And Richard? A pause. "He'll be there. He doesn't have the capital to bid, but his lawyers are trying to delay the sale. They won't succeed, but he'll make noise." Elena smiled. "Let him." "There's something else," David said carefully. "I've been hearing rumors about Richard's company. Apparently there's been significant financial mismanagement, funds missing, contracts that don't add up. His board is starting to ask questions." Elena's pulse quickened. How significant? Enough that his remaining assets might be vulnerable to acquisition, if someone were interested in pursuing that avenue. Elena closed her eyes, thinking. She could destroy him, buy up his debt, force liquidation, watch his empire crumble the way hers once did. But that wasn't the plan. That wasn't the point. "Keep monitoring," she said finally, "but don't make any moves yet. Let's focus on the auction first." "Understood." Elena hung up and poured herself a glass of wine from the suite's complimentary bar. She carried it to the window and raised it in a silent toast to the city below, to the woman she used to be, and the woman she had become. Whooped. The night before the auction, Elena did something she hadn't planned. She went to the Grand Meridian. Not for the summit. That was tomorrow. She just walked into the lobby, dressed in jeans and a sweater, a scarf from her first collection wrapped around her shoulders, and stood in the space where her life had ended. The chandeliers still hung like frozen stars. The marble still gleamed, but she felt nothing. No ghosts, no trauma, no fear, just empty space. A bartender in the hotel lounge looked up as she passed. "Can I get you something, miss?" Elena paused, then nodded. "Whiskey. Neat." She sat at the bar, the same bar where Richard's colleagues used to gather after galas, where deals were made and lives were traded over expensive liquor and false camaraderie. The bartender slid her drink across polished wood. "Visiting or local?" "Both," Elena said, taking a sip. "Used to live here, moved away. Coming back?" "Business or pleasure?" Elena smiled. "Justice." The bartender blinked, then laughed. "That's a new one. Good luck with that." "Thank you." She finished her drink in silence, left cash on the bar, and walked out without looking back. Tomorrow, she would return, but not as a ghost, as a conqueror. The day of the auction was crisp and clear, autumn sunlight cutting through the city like a blade. Elena dressed with care, not in designer labels or expensive jewelry, in one of her own designs. A tailored coat in deep charcoal, the lines clean and powerful, the fabric sustainable cashmere that moved like water. Underneath, a simple black dress. Her hair pulled back in a sleek twist, minimal makeup, no perfume. She looked like exactly what she was. A woman who had built herself from nothing and owed the world no explanations. David met her outside the auction house, a historic building downtown that specialized in high-value estate sales. "You ready?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Let's go." The auction room was already filling when they arrived. Rows of seats faced a raised platform where an auctioneer was setting up. Bidders clustered in groups, sizing each other up, calculating odds and strategies. Elena took her seat in the middle of the room, not too close, not too far, and waited. She didn't look around, didn't need to. She could feel the energy in the room, the hunger, the desperation of people who saw the Halston estate not as a home, but as an opportunity. The auctioneer called the room to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We'll begin with Lot 17, the Halston estate, a historic property spanning 12,000 square feet on 4 acres of prime land. Opening bid is set at $8 million. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A paddle went up immediately. $8 million. Another. 8.5. $9 million. The bids climbed quickly, the auctioneer's voice a rhythmic chant, numbers rising like a fever pitch. 10 million. 11. 12. Elena sat perfectly still, her paddle resting in her lap. David glanced at her. "When are you—" "Not yet," she murmured. The bidding slowed at 13 million. Only 3 paddles still active. A developer Elena recognized from property records, a Preservation Society representative, and someone in the back corner she couldn't see. 13.5, the developer called. The preservation rep hesitated, then lowered their paddle. Just 2 bidders left. 14 million, the voice from the back called. Elena froze. She knew that voice. The auctioneer nodded. 14 million from bidder 23. Do I hear 14.5? The developer looked back, trying to see who was bidding, then shook his head and lowered his paddle. "Going once," the auctioneer said. Going twice?" Elena raised her paddle. 15 million, she said clearly. The room went silent. Every head turned. The auctioneer recovered smoothly. 15 million from bidder 47. Do I hear 15.5? Movement in the back. And then he stepped into view. Richard Halston. He wasn't bidding. He was watching. Their eyes met across the room. Elena saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His face went pale. His mouth opened. His hand gripped the back of the chair in front of him like he needed it to stay upright. Because he knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. 16 million, the voice from the back corner called again. Not Richard. Someone bidding on his behalf. Elena didn't hesitate. 18 million. Gasps echoed through the room. The auctioneer's eyes widened. 18 million from bidder 47. Do I hear 19? Silence. The bidder in the back corner looked at Richard. Richard's face was ashen. He shook his head. The auctioneer lifted his gavel. Going once, going twice. The gavel fell. The sound cracked through the room like thunder. Sold to bidder 47 for $18 million. Elena stood slowly, her legs steady, her heart pounding, but her face calm. David was grinning beside her. "You did it." "Not yet," Elena said quietly. She walked down the aisle toward the exit, passing Richard on her way. He was staring at her like she was a ghost. "Elena?" he whispered. She stopped, turned, met his eyes with ice in her own. "My name," she said softly, "is Arya Vale." Then she walked out, leaving him standing in the ruins of the empire he had built on her silence. The legal transfer took 3 days. Elena signed papers in a lawyer's office overlooking the city, her signature firm and unwavering, David beside her, ensuring every clause protected her interests. When the final document was notarized, the lawyer extended his hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Vale. You now own the Halston estate." Elena shook his hand. "Thank you." She drove to the mansion alone. The gates were open now, the locks changed to codes only she possessed, She parked in the circular driveway where she had once been dropped off carrying a suitcase in the rain and walked up the steps to the front door. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The door swung open. Elena stepped inside. The mansion was empty, stripped of furniture and personal effects, just bones and echoes. Her footsteps rang against marble floors as she walked through rooms that used to intimidate her, spaces that used to make her feel small. She climbed the stairs to the master bedroom where she had slept beside Richard for 7 years, where she had believed she was building a life. Stood at the window overlooking gardens that had once been manicured to perfection, and felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. This house had been her prison. Now it was her property. Her phone rang. Claire. "Did you get it?" Claire asked without preamble. "I got it," Elena confirmed. "How does it feel?" Elena looked around the empty bedroom, at walls that used to witness her invisibility. "Like closure," she said finally. "But we're not done yet." "What's next?" Elena walked back downstairs, her mind already spinning with plans. "Now," she said, "I finish what I started." The news spread through the city like wildfire. By evening, every real estate blog, business journal, and society column was running the same story with variations of the same headline. Mystery buyer acquires Halston estate for record. $18 million. Sustainable fashion mogul Aria Vale enters real estate market with stunning auction win. The fall of House Halston. How one woman built an empire while another crumbled. Elena sat in her hotel suite, scrolling through articles on her laptop, watching her carefully constructed anonymity evaporate in real time. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing. Interview requests, partnership proposals, investors wanting to know her next move. She ignored them all except one, David Whitmore. "The cat's out of the bag," he said when she answered. "Your identity is public now. Every journalist in the city wants to know who Aria Vale really is and why she bought Richard Halston's mansion." "Let them wonder," Elena said calmly. "They won't wonder long. Someone will dig. Find connections. Your marriage to Richard is public record." "I know." "Elena," he paused. "Are you prepared for what happens when they make that connection?" She looked out at the city lights, at the skyline she used to admire from Richard's penthouse, back when she thought belonging to his world was the same as belonging to herself. "I've been preparing for 3 years," she said. "Let them dig." David was quiet for a moment. "What's your end game here?" "Justice," Elena said simply. "Not revenge, justice. And the difference is, revenge destroys, justice rebuilds." She could hear David smile through the phone. "You're either brilliant or insane. Maybe both." After they hung up, Elena opened a new document on her laptop and began to type. Not a statement to the press, a proposal for what the Halston estate would become. She worked through the night, fueled by coffee and clarity, her fingers flying across the keyboard as the vision took shape. By dawn, she had a comprehensive plan. The mansion would be transformed into a foundation, a resource center for women escaping financial abuse, domestic control, situations where their identities had been systematically erased. It would offer legal aid, financial literacy programs, job training, temporary housing, mental health support, everything Elena had needed 3 years ago and couldn't find, everything that might have saved her months of struggle. She would call it the Aria Foundation, not the Elena Vaughn Foundation, because Elena Vaughn was the woman who had been erased. Aria Vale was the woman who refused to let anyone else suffer the same fate. Elena saved the document, attached it to an email to David, and pressed send. Then she finally allowed herself to sleep. She woke to her phone vibrating insistently. 12 missed calls, 27 text messages, all from David. She called him back, her voice rough with sleep. "What's wrong?" "Wrong? Nothing's wrong. This proposal is genius, but we need to move fast." Elena sat up. "Why?" "Because Richard's lawyers filed an emergency injunction this morning trying to block the sale. They're claiming undue influence and demanding an investigation into your funding sources." Ice flooded Elena's veins. "Can they do that?" "They can try. They won't succeed. Your purchase was completely legitimate, but it's going to drag this out, make noise, give Richard time to—" "To what?" Elena interrupted. He has no leverage, no capital. What can he possibly do? He can make this personal, David said quietly. And from what I'm hearing, that's exactly his plan. Elena stood, pacing to the window. Let him try. There's more, David continued. I've been digging into his company like you asked. The financial mismanagement I mentioned? It's worse than I thought. Someone has been systematically siphoning funds for years. Millions of dollars hidden in shell companies and offshore accounts. Richard? That's the thing. I don't think it's Richard. Elena frowned. Then who? I'm still tracing the paper trail, but all signs point to his former business partner, Marcus Webb, the same partner who helped Richard build his empire. Elena remembered Marcus, smooth, charming, always at Richard's side during the marriage, always whispering in his ear at parties. If Marcus has been stealing from Richard, why hasn't Richard noticed? Because Richard's been too busy playing king, David said. He delegated everything to Marcus, trusted him completely, and Marcus used that trust to hollow out the company from the inside. Elena's mind raced. How bad is it? Bad enough that if the board finds out, Richard could face criminal charges for negligence at minimum. The company could be dissolved, shareholders could sue for fraud. And Marcus? Already gone. Disappeared 3 weeks ago, liquidated his assets, and vanished. Elena closed her eyes, processing. Does Richard know? Not yet. But he will soon. His accountants are conducting an internal audit. They'll find the discrepancies within days. Elena felt something twist in her chest. Not sympathy, but something close to it. Richard had destroyed her without hesitation, had humiliated her publicly, erased her systematically, thrown her away like she was nothing, and now his own empire was collapsing because he had trusted the wrong person. The irony was almost poetic. What do you want to do? David asked. Elena turned from the window. How much of the company is vulnerable? If the fraud is as extensive as I think, the company will be forced into bankruptcy proceedings. Assets will be liquidated to pay creditors. The controlling shares will go up for sale. And if someone were to buy those shares? A pause. They would own Halston Development. Elena's heart beat faster. Get me numbers. How much would it cost to acquire controlling interest? Elena, are you sure you want to? Get me the numbers, David. She heard him typing. Preliminary estimate, based on current valuation minus projected losses from the fraud revelation, you'd need approximately 25 to 30 million to secure majority control. I don't have that liquid. No, but you have assets, properties you've acquired, your fashion company. If you leveraged everything, but... No, Elena said sharply. I won't risk what I've built. There has to be another way. There is, David said slowly. Silent partners. Investors who believe in your vision. You've made a name for yourself as someone who transforms properties ethically. There are people who would back you. Elena considered this. How quickly could we raise the capital? If I make calls today? 2 weeks? Maybe less. Do it, Elena said, but quietly. I don't want Richard to know I'm involved until it's done. Understood. After she hung up, Elena stood in the silence of her hotel suite, her reflection pale in the window glass. She was about to cross a line she hadn't intended to cross. Buying the mansion was symbolic, personal. But buying Richard's company? That was war. And yet, as she thought about it, as she let the possibility settle into her bones, Elena realized it wasn't about destroying Richard. It was about saving what he had built from being destroyed by his own negligence. It was about transforming something corrupt into something ethical. It was about proving that power didn't have to come at the cost of integrity. She pulled out her phone and called Claire. I need advice, Elena said when Claire answered. You're buying his company, aren't you? Elena laughed shakily. Am I that predictable? No, Claire said. You're that determined. Tell me what you're thinking. Elena explained the situation, the fraud, the opportunity, the risk. Claire listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, silence stretched between them. Do you remember what I told you when you first came to Crescent Bay? Claire asked finally. You told me a lot of things. I told you that you were weaving what you felt, that honesty was rare, that it mattered. Elena waited. This decision, Claire continued, needs to come from that same place. Not from anger, not from revenge, from honesty. What do you honestly want? Elena closed her eyes. I want to prove that everything he said I couldn't do without him, I can do better than him. I want to take the empire he built on ego and transform it into something that actually helps people. I want him to see that the woman he threw away was worth more than he ever understood. Then do it, Claire said simply. But don't lose yourself in the process. Don't become him. I won't. Promise me. I promise. The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings and negotiations. Elena flew back to Crescent Bay only once to check on her team and ensure her fashion company wasn't suffering from her absence. Her head designer, a young woman named Sophie, who had been with her since the beginning, met her at the studio with concern etched across her face. You look exhausted, Sophie said bluntly. Elena managed a tired smile. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground. Sophie crossed her arms. What's happening in the city? The rumors are saying you're taking over Halston Development. The rumors are premature. But not wrong? Elena sat down, her body heavy with fatigue. Richard's company is failing because of fraud. If I don't step in, hundreds of employees will lose their jobs. Projects will be abandoned half-finished. Investors will lose everything. And you care about that why? Sophie asked pointedly. After what he did to you? Because those employees didn't humiliate me. Those investors didn't throw me out in the rain. They're innocent people whose lives will be destroyed by someone else's negligence. Sophie studied her for a long moment. You're going to save the company he stole from you. I'm going to save the company he destroyed, Elena corrected. There's a difference. Sophie shook her head slowly. You're either a saint or a fool. I'm neither, Elena said. I'm just someone who understands what it's like to have your entire life stripped away through no fault of your own. And I refuse to let that happen to people who don't deserve it. Sophie's expression softened. Okay, what do you need from us? Keep the fashion line running. I'll be back as soon as this is finished. And if it's not finished quickly? Elena stood. Then I'll figure it out. I always do. She flew back to the city that evening. David met her at the airport, his face grim. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Elena's stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Richard knows you're behind the mansion purchase, and now he's figured out you're circling his company. How? One of the investors we approached talked. Word got back to Richard's board. They're panicking. Some want to accept your offer. Others are loyal to Richard and want to fight. What does Richard want? David handed her his phone. On the screen was an email from Richard to David. Tell Ms. Vale that if she wants to destroy me, she should have the courage to do it to my face. I'll be waiting at the Halston Development offices tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Elena read it twice. It's a trap, David said. He's going to record you. Use whatever you say against you. Paint you as vindictive. Maybe, Elena said quietly. Or maybe he just wants to understand. You can't seriously be considering... Set up the meeting, Elena interrupted. Tomorrow at noon, I'll be there. David stared at her. Elena, I'm not afraid of him anymore, she said, handing back the phone. And it's time he understood that. The Halston Development offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. Elena had been here before, years ago, attending cocktail parties in the executive lounge, smiling beside Richard as he networked and dealt and built his empire on handshakes and half-truths. She remembered feeling small in these spaces, invisible. Now she walked through the lobby with her head high, wearing one of her own designs, a slate gray suit that fit like armor, her heels clicking against marble with steady confidence. The receptionist looked up, recognition flickering across her face. Ms. Vale, Mr. Halston is expecting you, 23rd floor. Elena rode the elevator alone, watching the city shrink beneath her through glass walls. The doors opened onto a floor that reeked of desperation trying to look like success. Worn carpet, outdated furniture, motivational posters that had faded from too much sunlight. This wasn't the empire she remembered. This was the ruins. Richard's secretary, a middle-aged woman Elena didn't recognize, gestured toward a conference room. He's inside. Elena pushed open the door. Richard stood at the window, his back to her, his shoulders tense beneath an expensive suit that didn't quite hide how much weight he'd lost. He turned when she entered. Elena had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Imagined what she would feel when she finally saw him again. Anger, satisfaction, triumph. Instead, she felt nothing. He was just a man, older than she remembered, grayer, smaller somehow, like the power he used to radiate had leaked out through cracks in his armor. "Elena," he said, her name rough in his mouth. "It's Arya," she corrected calmly, closing the door behind her. Richard flinched. "That's not your name." "Neither was Halston," she said, "but I wore it for 7 years because you asked me to." He looked at her like she was a stranger. "What happened to you?" Elena almost laughed. "You happened to me. You announced our divorce at a party, threw me out of my home, left me with nothing. I gave you a settlement offer. You gave me $5,000 for legal fees," Elena interrupted, her voice sharp. "For 7 years of marriage, 7 years of shaping my entire existence around yours. That's what I was worth to you." Richard's jaw tightened. The prenup was clear. "The prenup was a document you handed me the night before our wedding and told me to sign. I was 23 years old. I trusted you." "And I trusted Marcus," Richard shot back, his composure cracking. "Trusted him with everything, and he destroyed me. So maybe we're both just idiots who trusted the wrong people." Elena studied him. "You think we're the same? You think your business partner stealing from you is equivalent to your wife being humiliated in front of the entire city? I think we both know what it's like to be betrayed by someone we loved." The word hung between them. Loved. Had Richard loved her? Elena didn't know anymore. Maybe he had, in his own limited way. Or maybe he had loved the idea of her, the accessory, the proof of his success. It didn't matter now. "Why did you ask me here?" Elena asked. Richard moved away from the window, sinking into a chair like he could barely stand. "Because I need to understand. Why are you doing this? The mansion, I understand. It was symbolic. But buying my company? Destroying everything I built?" "I'm not destroying anything," Elena said. "You already did that. I'm trying to save it." He looked up sharply. "Save it? Your company is hemorrhaging money because you trusted a thief. Your employees are going to lose their jobs. Your investors are going to lose their savings. I can prevent that. By taking control. By restructuring. Implementing ethical practices. Turning your company into something that actually benefits the community instead of just extracting wealth from it." Richard laughed bitterly. "You sound like one of those proposals you used to write. The ones I told you were too idealistic." "The ones you mocked," Elena corrected. "The ones you said would never work in the real world. And now you're going to prove me wrong." "I already have," she said quietly. "My company is worth $10 million. I built it from nothing in 3 years. Everything you said I couldn't do without you, I did better." Richard's face crumpled. "I never said you couldn't." "Yes, you did," Elena interrupted. "Maybe not in words, but in every action, every decision you made for me, every time you chose what I wore, who I talked to, what I was allowed to dream about. You systematically erased me until I didn't exist outside of being your wife." "I was trying to protect you." "From what?" "From failure. From disappointment. From—" He stopped. "From being myself?" Elena finished. Richard was silent. Elena sat down across from him, her hands folded on the table between them. "I didn't come here for revenge," she said. "I came here to tell you the truth. The woman you threw away 3 years ago is gone. She doesn't exist anymore. I killed her. I became someone new, someone stronger, someone who doesn't need your permission to exist. And now you're going to take everything from me." "No," Elena said. "I'm going to take responsibility for what you couldn't. I'm going to save your employees' jobs. I'm going to make sure the projects you abandoned get finished properly. I'm going to turn your company into something worth being proud of." "Why?" Richard's voice broke. "Why would you save anything of mine after what I did to you?" Elena met his eyes. "Because this isn't about you. It's about the hundreds of people whose lives depend on this company surviving. And unlike you, I can't sleep at night knowing I had the power to help them, and chose revenge instead." Richard dropped his head into his hands. For a long moment, the only sound was traffic humming 23 floors below. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red. "There's something you need to know," he said hoarsely. "Something I should have told you years ago." Elena waited. Richard stood, walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. He set it on the table between them. "Open it," he said. Elena hesitated, then reached for the folder. Inside were documents, legal papers, birth certificates, DNA tests. She scanned them, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "I don't understand," she whispered. Richard sat back down, his voice hollow. "My father had an affair 30 years ago with a woman he met at a conference. She got pregnant, had a daughter." Elena's hands shook. "Richard, why are you—" "The daughter was given up for adoption," he continued. "My father paid the mother to disappear, to never contact our family, to let the baby be raised by someone else." Elena's vision blurred. "When I met you," Richard said, "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But my father did. He recognized your face from photos the adoption agency had sent him over the years, and he told me the truth after we were engaged." Elena couldn't breathe. "You're my half-sister," Richard said, the words falling like stones. "Our marriage was never real. It was a cover-up, a way to keep you close, to control the narrative, to make sure you never found out who you really were." The room spun. Elena gripped the edge of the table, her mind fracturing. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The DNA test is in the folder," Richard said. "I had it done without your knowledge. I'm sorry for everything." Elena looked down at the papers, at proof of a lie that had shaped her entire life. She wasn't just Richard's discarded wife. She was his hidden sister, the daughter his father had erased. "Why are you telling me this now?" she managed. "Because you deserve the truth," Richard said. "And because if you're going to take my company, you should know you're not taking it from a stranger. You're taking it from family." Elena stood, her legs barely holding her. "I need to leave." "Elena, don't," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't say my name. Don't say anything." She grabbed the folder and walked out. The elevator ride down felt like falling. She made it to the street before her knees gave out, sat on the curb, the folder clutched to her chest, and tried to remember how to breathe. David found her 20 minutes later, still sitting on the curb outside Halston Development, the folder clutched in her white-knuckled hands, her carefully constructed composure shattered into pieces around her. He didn't ask questions, just sat down beside her, his expensive suit getting dirty on the concrete, and waited. Cars passed, people walked by without looking. The city moved around them like they were stones in a river. Finally, Elena spoke. "Did you know?" Her voice was barely audible. David turned to look at her. "Know what?" Elena handed him the folder. He opened it, scanned the contents, and went very still. "Jesus," he breathed. "Don't," Elena said sharply. "Don't say that." David closed the folder carefully. "How long have you known?" 20 minutes. Her laugh was hollow. 20 minutes ago, I thought I was just his ex-wife. Now I'm—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "His half-sister," David said quietly. "And the heir to a fortune that was stolen from you before you were even born." Elena looked at him. "What?" "If you're his father's biological daughter, you have a legal claim to the Halston estate. To everything. The old man's will divided his assets between Richard and his legitimate children. But if you can prove you're his daughter, you're entitled to a share." "I don't want his money," Elena said. "Maybe not. But you deserve to know the full picture. Richard's father died 5 years ago. Left everything to Richard. But if you contest the will with this DNA evidence, you could force a redistribution of assets." Elena pressed her palms against her eyes. "I can't think about this right now." "Then don't," David said. "Let me handle the legal research. You need to process what you just learned." "How am I supposed to process this?" Elena's voice cracked. "I spent 7 years married to my own brother. I didn't know." He didn't know at first, but his father knew. His father knew the entire time and let it happen anyway. "His father was a monster," David said flatly, "and Richard was a coward for not telling you the moment he found out." "When did he find out?" Elena whispered. "The documents don't say." David flipped through the folder again, examining dates. "The DNA test is dated 6 years ago, 1 year into your marriage. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. He knew for 6 years, she said slowly. He knew we were related, and he kept me in that marriage for 6 more years. Yes. And then he divorced me in front of everyone without ever telling me why. Yes. Elena stood abruptly, the folder falling to the ground. I need to leave. I need to get out of this city. David gathered the documents quickly. Where are you going? I don't know. Anywhere. Nowhere. She was walking now, her heels clicking against pavement, her breath coming in short gasps. I can't be here. I can't. Elena, stop. David caught her arm, turned her to face him. You can run, he said. You can get on a plane right now and disappear and no one would blame you. But that's not who you are anymore. You're not the woman who ran away 3 years ago. You're the woman who came back and bought his mansion, who's about to take over his company, who built an empire from nothing. I built it on a lie, Elena said, tears streaming down her face. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. No, David said firmly. The lie was what they told you. The truth is what you made of yourself despite them. Your company is real. Your success is real. Your strength is real. Don't let his confession take that away from you. Elena pulled free from his grasp. I need time. I know, but time is something we don't have. The board meets tomorrow to vote on the acquisition. If you're not there, Richard wins by default. Let him win, Elena said bitterly. Let him have his dying company. I don't care anymore. Yes, you do, David said, because it's not about him. Remember, it's about the employees, the investors, the people who don't deserve to suffer because of his father's sins. Elena closed her eyes. He was right. She hated that he was right. 24 hours, she said finally. I need 24 hours to think. Then I'll decide. David nodded. Where will you go? Elena looked up at the sky, at clouds moving across gray expanse. The ocean, she said. I need to see the ocean. She drove through the night, her rental car eating miles of highway, city lights fading behind her until there was nothing but darkness and stars and the white lines disappearing beneath her wheels. She arrived in Crescent Bay as dawn broke over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and purple so vivid it hurt to look at. Elena parked at the harbor and walked down to the beach. The same beach where she had first felt like she could breathe 3 years ago. The same water that had witnessed her transformation from Elena Vaughn into Aria Vale. She sat on the sand, pulled her knees to her chest, and let the waves drown out the chaos in her mind. Footsteps crunched behind her. Elena didn't turn around. She knew who it was. Claire sat down beside her, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She handed one to Elena without speaking. They sat in silence for a long time, watching the tide come in. Finally, Claire spoke. Want to talk about it? Elena shook her head. Want me to guess? Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. You won't get it right. Try me. You found out something about Richard that changes everything, something that makes you question whether you should keep fighting. Elena looked at her sharply. How did you? Because I know you, Claire said simply. And I know that look. It's the same look you had when you first showed up here, like someone pulled the ground out from under you and you're trying to figure out how to stand. Elena took a sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through her cold hands. What if the ground was never real to begin with? Then you build new ground, Claire said. That's what you did last time. This is different. Is it? Claire turned to face her. 3 years ago, you lost your identity as someone's wife. You thought that's all you were. And you proved yourself wrong. You built something beautiful out of nothing. So what's different now? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she told Claire everything. About the DNA test, about being Richard's sister, about the marriage that should never have happened, about the father who had hidden her existence and the son who had perpetuated the lie. Claire listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. When Elena finished, Claire set down her coffee cup and stood. Walk with me. They walked along the beach, their feet sinking into wet sand, gulls crying overhead. You want to know what I think? Claire asked. Do I have a choice? No? Claire picked up a piece of driftwood, turned it over in her hands. I think you're letting them win. Elena stopped walking. Excuse me? Richard's father tried to erase you before you were born. Richard tried to erase you when he divorced you. And now you're considering erasing yourself by walking away from everything you've built. Claire threw the driftwood into the waves. They don't deserve that power over you. I'm not erasing myself. I'm protecting myself. From what? The truth? The truth is ugly, but you already survived it. You survived being thrown away with nothing. You survived building a new life from scratch. You survived becoming someone they never expected. Why would you stop now? Because I don't know who I am anymore, Elena said, her voice breaking. I thought I was Elena Vaughn, who became Elena Halston, who became Aria Vale. But what if I'm just a mistake that everyone tried to hide? Claire grabbed her shoulders, forced Elena to meet her eyes. You listen to me. You are not a mistake. You are not defined by their sins or their secrets or their shame. You are defined by what you chose to do when they tried to destroy you. You chose to survive. You chose to create. You chose to build something that helps people. That's who you are. Tears spilled down Elena's face. What if that's not enough? It's more than enough, Claire said fiercely. And deep down, you know it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You'd be on a plane to somewhere they'd never find you. But you came back to the place where you found yourself. Because you're not running. You're deciding. Elena wiped her eyes. Deciding what? Whether you're going to let their truth become your prison or your power. The words settled into Elena's bones. Prison or power? She had spent 3 years transforming pain into power. Why would she stop now? Elena looked out at the ocean, at waves that never stopped moving, never stopped changing, never stopped being exactly what they were meant to be. I need to make some calls, she said. Claire smiled. That's my girl. Elena called David from her studio. I'm in, she said without preamble. Whatever it takes to secure the company. I'm in. She heard relief flood his voice. The board meets at 2 o'clock. Can you be there? I'll be there. What changed your mind? Elena looked around her studio, at the designs covering the walls, at the evidence of everything she had built. I realized that letting them define me is the same as letting them destroy me. And I'm done being destroyed. Good, David said, because I have news. The investors came through. We have $28 million in committed capital. More than enough to secure majority control. Elena's heart raced. That's more than we needed. They believe in you, in what you're going to do with the company. Half of them are women who read about your foundation plans. They want to be part of something that matters. Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest. Then let's give them something worth believing in. She hung up and immediately called her team in Portland. Sophie answered on the first ring. Please tell me you're coming back soon. We have 3 major orders I need your approval on. I need you to handle them, Elena said. I'm promoting you to creative director. Silence. Then, what? You heard me? I need someone I trust running the fashion line while I focus on the real estate development. You've been with me since the beginning. You know my vision. You can execute it. Elena, I can't yet. Yes, you can, Elena interrupted. And you will. I'll still be involved, but I need you to step up. Can you do that? She heard Sophie take a deep breath. Yes. Yes, I can do that. Good. I'll send you the paperwork. You start immediately. After she hung up, Elena sat in the quiet of her studio and let herself feel it. The weight of what she was about to do. The risk. The possibility. The power. She was about to walk into a boardroom and take control of a company that had been built on lies and ego and the systematic erasure of everyone who wasn't deemed worthy. And she was going to transform it into something that actually mattered. Not for revenge, for justice. The boardroom on the 23rd floor was packed when Elena arrived. 15 board members sat around a mahogany table that probably cost more than most people's cars. Lawyers lined the walls. David sat at the head of the table, looking confident and sharp. Richard sat at the opposite end, his face gray, his hands folded on the table in front of him. He looked up when Elena entered. Their eyes met. She saw recognition, shame, fear. She felt nothing. Miss Vale, the board chairman said, standing. Thank you for joining us. Elena took her seat directly across from Richard. Thank you for the opportunity. The chairman cleared his throat. We've reviewed your proposal. It's unconventional, to say the least. You're asking for majority control of Halston Development with the intention of completely restructuring our business model. That's correct, Elena said calmly. And you believe you can make this company profitable while also implementing these ethical guidelines? I don't believe it. I know it. Because I've already done it with my own company. Sustainable practices don't reduce profit. They increase long-term stability and brand loyalty. Ethical development doesn't limit growth. It creates opportunities that exploitative development misses. A board member leaned forward. With all due respect, Ms. Vale, fashion and real estate are very different industries. Are they? Elena met his eyes. Both require understanding what people actually need versus what they think they want. Both require building something that lasts beyond short-term gain. Both require integrity. The only difference is scale. Another board member spoke up. We've done background checks. You have no experience in real estate development. Neither did Richard when he started, Elena said. He inherited his father's connections and capital. I built mine from nothing. Which experience do you think is more valuable? Richard flinched. Furthermore, Elena continued, pulling out a folder, I've spent the last 6 months acquiring and successfully transforming 5 distressed properties in this city. Each one is now profitable and serving the community. Each one was purchased under my investment company, Coastal Holdings Group, the same company that bought the Halston estate. She slid the folder across the table. The chairman opened it, his eyes widening as he scanned the documents. These numbers are impressive, he admitted. They're honest, Elena corrected, which is more than can be said for the numbers Richard's partner Marcus Webb was providing. The room went silent. Richard's jaw clenched. We're aware of the fraud, the chairman said carefully. An internal audit is ongoing. The audit will show that Marcus siphoned over $40 million over 5 years, Elena said. Money that should have gone to project completion, employee benefits, and investor dividends. Money that Richard failed to track because he was too busy building a personal brand to actually manage his company. That's not fair, Richard said quietly. Elena turned to him. Isn't it? You delegated everything to Marcus because you trusted him, just like you trusted your father. Just like you asked me to trust you, and every single person who trusted you ended up betrayed. Richard looked like he'd been slapped. The chairman intervened. Ms. Vale, this is a business discussion, not a personal one. It's both, Elena said, because the reason this company is failing isn't just financial mismanagement. It's a culture of ego over integrity, of image over substance, of power without accountability. And that culture came from the top. She stood, walking to the window overlooking the city. I'm offering you a choice, she said. You can vote to accept my acquisition. I will restructure this company to focus on sustainable development, ethical labor practices, and community benefit. I will retain every current employee who wants to stay. I will complete every abandoned project. I will make this company profitable and respectable. She turned back to face them. Or you can reject my offer and watch this company dissolve in bankruptcy proceedings. Your employees will lose their jobs. Your investors will lose their money. And Richard's legacy will be nothing but fraud and failure. The silence was absolute. I need a moment to confer with the board, the chairman said. Take your time, Elena said, returning to her seat. The board members huddled at one end of the table, their voices low and urgent. Elena sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her expression calm. Across from her, Richard was staring at the table. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly, his voice barely audible. Elena met his eyes. Because someone has to. You could destroy me completely. Use the DNA test. Claim your inheritance. Expose everything. I could, Elena agreed. But that would make me like you. And I spent 3 years becoming someone better. Richard's face crumpled. I'm sorry. For everything. I know it doesn't matter now, but I'm sorry. You're right, Elena said. It doesn't matter. What matters is what happens next. The board broke from their huddle. The chairman returned to his seat, his expression grave. We've reached a decision, he said. After careful consideration of the circumstances, the financial projections, and the current state of this company, the board votes to accept your acquisition offer. Elena's heart stopped. Effective immediately, the chairman continued. Miss Aria Vale will assume majority ownership and operational control of Halston Development. The company will be restructured according to her proposal. Richard Halston will be removed as president. Richard closed his eyes. However, the chairman said, looking at Elena, Mr. Halston retains a minority share and has requested an advisory position. Do you accept? Elena looked at Richard, at the man who had been her husband, her brother, her destroyer, at the man who was now asking for her mercy. She could say no, could cut him out completely, could make him feel what she felt 3 years ago. But that wasn't justice. That was revenge. I accept, Elena said, on one condition. You work. Actually work. No title. No executive privileges. You start at the bottom, and you learn what it means to build something with integrity. Richard looked up, hope and disbelief warring in his eyes. You'd let me stay? I'd let you try to become someone worth forgiving, Elena corrected. Whether you succeed is up to you. The chairman nodded. Then it's settled. Welcome to Halston Development, Ms. Vale. Elena stood, shook his hand, and became the owner of an empire. The news broke within hours. Aria Vale takes control of Halston Development in stunning acquisition. From fashion designer to real estate mogul, the rise of an unlikely power player, Richard Halston steps down as mystery woman reveals connection to family legacy. That last headline made Elena pause. Someone had leaked the DNA test. She called David immediately. Did you? Not me, he said. Must have been someone from the board. I'm sorry. Are you okay? Elena looked out her hotel window at the city sparkling below. Actually, she said slowly, I think I am. Because the truth was out now. All of it. She was Richard's half-sister, the daughter who had been hidden and erased and denied. And instead of destroying her, the revelation made her stronger. Because now everyone knew that she hadn't just taken Richard's company, she had reclaimed her birthright. 3 months later, Elena stood in the transformed Halston estate. The mansion that had once been her prison was now the headquarters of the Aria Foundation. The ballroom where Richard had announced their divorce now held desks where women worked with counselors on financial planning and job training. The master bedroom where she had slept for 7 years now housed a legal aid office. The gardens where she used to walk alone now bloomed with vegetables grown by women learning sustainable agriculture. Claire stood beside her, looking around with approval. You did it, Claire said. We did it, Elena corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Sure you could have. You just would have been more miserable in the process. Elena laughed, the sound genuine and free. Margaret from the Harborview Lodge had flown in for the opening ceremony, bringing with her a contingent of artists from Crescent Bay who wanted to see what their former tenant had accomplished. David stood in a corner talking to investors, his face proud. Sophie was there too, showing off the latest fashion line that had just been featured in 3 major magazines. And in the back of the room, wearing jeans and a work shirt, carrying boxes of supplies to the supply closet, was Richard. He had kept his word, showed up every day for 3 months, working whatever job Elena assigned him, never complaining, never demanding recognition. He was learning, slowly, but he was trying. Elena walked over to him. You didn't have to come today, she said. Richard set down the box. Yes, I did. This place was my father's legacy, and yours. You made it into something beautiful. I wanted to see that. It's not about beauty, Elena said. It's about purpose. I know, Richard said quietly. I'm starting to understand that. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Richard spoke. I never thanked you for not destroying me when you had the chance. I didn't do it for you, Elena said. I did it because destruction doesn't heal anything. It just creates more damage. Still, thank you. Elena nodded. You're welcome. As Richard returned to work, Elena felt someone approach from behind. She turned to find a woman in her 60s, elegant and sharp-eyed, holding a glass of champagne. Ms. Vale, the woman said, I wanted to introduce myself, Catherine Moreau. I run a venture capital firm that focuses on women-led businesses. Elena shook her hand. Nice to meet you. I've been following your work for months now, Catherine said. The fashion line. The real estate acquisitions. This foundation. You're doing something extraordinary. I'm just trying to help people. You're doing more than that. You're proving that business can be both profitable and ethical. That power doesn't require exploitation. That's rare. Catherine handed her a business card. I'd like to discuss investment opportunities. I think you're just getting started. Elena looked at the card, then at the woman who had seen potential in her. I think you're right, she said. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed and the mansion was quiet, Elena walked through the rooms alone. She ended up in what used to be Richard's study, now converted into a library for the foundation's residents. The walls were lined with books, resources on financial literacy, legal rights, career development, mental health, everything she wished she had access to 3 years ago. Elena sat in a chair by the window and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through photos of the past 3 years. Her first design, her first sale, the studio in Crescent Bay, the boutiques in Portland, the properties she had transformed, the lives she had changed. And she realized something. She had won. Not because she had taken Richard's company, not because she had reclaimed the mansion, not even because she had built a multi-million-dollar empire. She had won because she had refused to stay erased, because she had chosen to become someone who mattered on her own terms, because she had transformed pain into power and power into purpose. Her phone rang. Claire. You still at the mansion? Claire asked. Yeah, just thinking. About? Elena looked around the library at the evidence of everything she had built. About how far I've come. And how far you're going, Claire added, because you're not done yet. No? Elena agreed, smiling. I'm not. After they hung up, Elena walked to the window overlooking the gardens. The same gardens where she used to feel invisible. The same view that used to make her feel small. Now she stood in front of it as the owner, the architect, the force that had transformed this space from a monument to ego into a sanctuary for healing. She thought about the woman who had been thrown out in the rain with a suitcase. The woman who had collapsed in a motel room and wanted to disappear. The woman who had chosen to become someone new instead of accepting erasure. That woman had been brave, had been relentless, had been everything Elena needed her to be. And now, standing in the mansion that had once witnessed her humiliation, Elena understood the final lesson. The most devastating revenge wasn't destruction, it was transcendence. It was becoming so successful, so powerful, so undeniably present that the people who tried to erase you couldn't look away. It was proving that their cruelty had failed, that you were not just surviving, but thriving, that you had taken every weapon they used against you and forged it into armor. Richard Halston had thrown her away thinking she was nothing without him, and Elena Vaughn had proven him catastrophically wrong. Not by destroying him, by outgrowing him, by becoming someone he could never diminish, by building an empire that would outlast his memory. Elena pulled out her phone one last time and opened her notes app. She typed a single sentence. The woman they tried to erase became untouchable. Then she closed the app, turned off the lights, and walked out of the mansion. Not as someone who needed it, as someone who owned it. And in the morning, she would wake up in her penthouse suite overlooking the ocean, in the city she had fled and conquered, and she would continue building the empire that proved one undeniable truth. You can try to erase a woman, but if she's strong enough, smart enough, and determined enough, she won't just survive. She'll return. And when she does, the world will never forget her name.